one of the most significant pieces of news that has come out of E3 is the Xbox One Project Scorpio, a refreshed version of the Xbox One considerably more powerful. Sony has announced the PS4K Neo, and this is Microsoft's response to that. This, however, is significantly more powerful, at least based on the information they've given us, significantly more powerful than the PS4K Neo, based on the information we have from Sony. So, that's subject to change. It's still going to take a while for these consoles to be released, obviously. 2017, I guess. Anyway, it's a significant improvement versus the Xbox One, the PS4, which right now are weaker than lower-end computers. And I'm not talking here taking into consideration the GTX 1080 or 1070. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about before those GPUs have come out, and RX 480. Not considering those, considering things like GTX 950 or a 750 Ti that's overclocked, that's more powerful. And at about the same price point, you can get a computer that runs games at 1080p, a higher frame rate, even 60, depends on the settings you pick, and higher settings than anything you can get on a console. Obviously, it depends on the game in question, what kind of improvements you can see. But overall, you can get the same kind of, you can get a better deal with a lower end computer than with the consoles. Not so much anymore, at least for the Xbox Project Scorpio. What's significant about it? Well, 8 CPU cores, okay, fair enough. 320 gigs of memory bandwidth, which is significantly higher than what the Xbox One has right now, the PS4 has right now, and higher than what the PS4K Neo has. What I mean by that, right now, the PS4K Neo has a memory bandwidth of 280. The PS4 has 176 gigs of memory bandwidth, whereas Project Scorpio is going with 320 gigs of memory bandwidth, which is very, very damn significant, obviously. A pretty large improvement, and it's actually about 100 or so gigs faster than the memory that they're going to have in the PS4K Neo. Now, they're going to achieve this apparently by making 12 gigs of GDDR5 in the console, 4 gigs more than what you have right now, and that's going to allow developers a lot more room to make their games look better. One of the biggest advantages with the current consoles, PS4 and Xbox One versus 360 and PS3, has been the memory, the large amount of memory. That's why you're seeing so many open world games on these consoles, because they have a lot more room to make those open worlds due to the memory. On top of that, the GPU, this is the biggest improvement. The GPU will have 6 teraflops, which is, just to give you an idea, that's better than a GTX 980, which is my GPU, and I'm not sure I would compare. I think the GTX 1070 has more, but not significantly higher. How much are we looking about right now? Apparently, the Titan X has 7 teraflops at the moment. 7 teraflops. Now, that's a way to measure GPU performance. It's not the perfect way, though. There's a lot of other factors to go into it. So it's not going to be as powerful as Titan X or GTX 1070, but it is going to be more powerful than the GTX 980, which right now is capable of playing any game at mostly maxed out settings at 1080p 60 FPS. So what you're going to see with the Xbox Project Scorpio is games being played at the very least at 1080p 60 FPS maxed out settings, or mostly maxed out settings. Or you're gonna see games 1440p or upscaled to 4K even. I very much doubt there will be native 4K gaming. They're talking about having native 4K games, and there probably will be a couple, but there will be a lot of sacrifices to be made because of that. So this is a game changer in a sense, and this is Microsoft's response to Sony kicking their asses with the PS4 versus the Xbox One. Microsoft lost the current generation of consoles. That's just how the situation is. because the PS4 was cheaper and delivered more horsepower. That's what it came down to. No marketing tricks or any bullshit like that. If anything, Microsoft shot themselves in the foot with all their idiotic marketing. Oh, always online DRM. Yeah, that went well. Not really. People were really fucking ticked off, and Sony's like, they tapped into that. And they decimated Microsoft as a result of that, as a result of various factors that went in their favor. Microsoft's stupidity and Sony just playing it, playing it well. Delivering a console that's cheaper and more powerful. And now the situation might be reversed. Sony might make some changes to the Neo, but it's unlikely that they will be able to cancel it or vastly improve it to match Project Scorpio. Just to give you an idea, supposedly the teraflop performance on the PS4K Neo will be about 4.2 versus 6. The difference is pretty high. Of course, the question is, over of price as well. How much is the Xbox Project Scorpio going to cost when it will be released? Same with the PS4K Neo. Whoever releases it first has an advantage. Whoever releases it for a lower price point has an advantage. If, however, they come out at about the same price point, and the Xbox One Project Scorpio is significantly more powerful, which it is based on these specs, then Microsoft will decimate Sony the next time around. That's just how the situation is going to be. And now developers will have a choice in terms of graphics. Now, Sony, we don't know what kind of deal or what kind of terms for the Xbox Project Scorpio will be, but we do know the terms for Project Neo, for the PS4K Neo. They will have to have the same gameplay, feature set, compatibility, all that. And the resolution on Neo games will have to be at minimum 1080p. There's nothing in relation to frame rate, so probably PS4 users will be screwed there. But there are certain things that they'll have to do. Sony is making sure that PS4 users are not being left behind, that they'll be able to easily upgrade to the Neo, and that's one big point. I'm curious to see what Microsoft will do when it comes to the terms with developers. So that's one thing to look for. But the real takeaway here, this is a game changer. This is vastly improved performance. It's not enough to get even 1440p maxed out 60 FPS gaming, but it is enough to, depends on the game, obviously. Depends on what they're going for. But it is enough to get maxed out 60 FPS 1080p gaming and upscale that to 4K. That is a real possibility, and that's probably what you're going to see. But now developers have a choice. Do they go with higher frame rate, or do they go with 4K gaming? Because they can do that. Do they go with better graphics settings, or do they go with higher resolution or higher frame rate? That is the decision they have right now. It's a real decision. Before they had the decision of what to cut. Do we cut the frame rate in order to achieve 1080p, or do we cut the resolution to achieve 60 FPS? Some games have done that already, but now they have a real choice on the subject matter instead of just cutting features on. Now they decide what's more important, basically. Obviously, it's between 4K 60 FPS or maxed out settings, what are you gonna go for versus what are you gonna cut for your game? What's more important for you this time around? That is the decisions developers are gonna be given with Project Scorpio. And it will change things around, because you're gonna see an improvement in graphics in games. I hate to say it, but the consoles, at least the current consoles, have done a lot more to improve graphics than PC has. The problem with PC exclusive games is that more often than not with PC exclusive titles, with the exception of a couple of titles, sure, Crysis 1 for instance, with the exception of titles like that, more often than not, the vast majority of PC exclusive games look like absolute piss, because the developers for those games, what they do is they make them run not even on low-end computers, but on potato machines. And that's a problem. Whereas with consoles, sure, they make them run on the equivalent of low-end computers, but not on potato computers. So consoles are able to do more. The reality is the best looking games right now are multi-platform titles. That's just how the situation is right now. Battlefront, for instance, is the best looking game right now on the market, and it's a multi-platform title, and it looks bloody amazing. Battlefield 1 is a multi-platform title, and and based on what I've seen, graphics-wise, it looks bloody amazing. So I'm really curious what they'll do. We might get things like simulated hair, not just on one character, which is what we've gotten so far, or better simulated water, or better lighting in games, better textures, all that. There's a lot of potential with Project Scorpio in particular. Of course, there will be improvements with the PS4K Neo as a result of the improved hardware, and now there's going to be pressure on Sony to improve the hardware even further than they wanted. So all in all, it's some pretty good news for everyone, really. Costin here, signing out.